And we're back on a Saturday morning, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Saturday morning here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, I was going over some of my earlier episodes, and I was thinking in terms of what I would refer to as guilty pleasure movies. And of course, I have this series, as many of you know, Guilty Pleasure Movies, and I was kind of pondering some other movies which, in my opinion, because Guilty Pleasure Person for one is just a great movie for someone else, and as we know, I am the what? The Planet Fitness of podcasts. This is a judgment-free zone. But to me, an example of a guilty pleasure movie that I have not spoken about, even though I am a big fan of the Three Principals and many of the supporting players, what I have not spoken of is a movie from 1988. It will celebrate its 37th anniversary on December 2nd of 2025. Now, before you jump off the Brooklyn Bridge, I did not know that exact precise bit of information. I knew the year of the movie. I didn't know that date until I looked it up. But the newest entry in our continuing series of guilty pleasure movies is Robert Towne. He wrote Chinatown, but he also wrote this film, and he directed it, and it's got three big movie stars at the center. It is a mystery, it's a thriller, it's a romance. The answer is D, in the immortal words of Chevy Chase. The answer is D, all three. The film is Tequila Sunrise. And a concept that I have discussed, which bears repeating, is the idea that sometimes it's not really that important, the mechanics of plot. You can break down the plot, you can get into and break down Kurt Russell, that's great. But you can get into nuts and bolts and mechanics of plot and character beats and why does this person do this when they should have done that. You can go into all of that. But then there are movies which, to me, exist simply to show off how attractive such and such a movie star was, always will be at this particular point in their life. For example, To Catch a Thief, Alfred Hitchcock, one of his lesser films, 1955, but with two of the most glittering stars to ever work in cinema, Cary Grant and Grace Kelly. Before she was about to become Princess Grace, because while they were in Monaco, spoiler alert, Hitchcock fucked up. By making the movie in Monaco, it allowed Grace Kelly to meet Prince Rainier, and that was the end of Grace Kelly's movie career right then and there. The last movie she ever made, To Catch a Thief. But To Catch a Thief, for all of the trappings, Cary Grant plays this guy John Roby. He's a jewel thief. He's this, he's that. And Grace Kelly is an heiress, we think. Her mom is loaded. Jesse Royce Landis plays a potential love interest of Cary Grant in To Catch a Thief. And then 4 years later, she plays his mom in North by Northwest. Mother! Great stuff. But To Catch a Thief, at its heart, is not a film about a jewel thief trying to reform himself, or even a jewel thief, spoiler alert again, trying to get Grace Kelly's clothes off. To Catch a Thief, you could say, is not even really a Hitchcock film. It is simply a film about two movie stars. It's a film about two movie stars. And Tequila Sunrise is a film about three movie stars. Because you can drive yourself nuts trying to figure out the plot to this movie and who's on whose side at what point. I don't really understand why this guy just shut your brain off. This is a film about three movie stars. And these three movie stars are Kurt Russell as FBI agent Nick Freesia, great name. Mel Gibson as drug dealer. He's drug dealer number one, Dale McCusick. And he's spectacular Michelle Pfeiffer as a restaurateur named Joanne Volinari. The backstory is just gold. So we're led to believe that Mel Gibson's drug dealer, Dale McCusick, well, he doesn't really want to be a drug dealer anymore. He wants to go straight. That's the sort of classic trappings here. He doesn't want to make millions as a drug dealer anymore. He has a conscience. He has an ex-wife, played really well by Ann Magnuson, who was everywhere in that era. Man, she busts his chops the whole movie. Great stuff. But he has an ex-wife. He has a kid. He does not want to break the law anymore. He just doesn't want to. He and Kurt Russell were friends, And the main part of the backstory is that they were engaging in some very illegal activities in Mexico while they were either vacationing there or they were traveling. I'm not exactly sure whether they were vacationers or whether they were just in Mexico to be in Mexico. But Dale McCusick did not turn in his buddy. He didn't turn in his friend. His friend, Nick Freesia, went home, did not face any charges or any prison time. And as a result, yes, they're still friends. Yes, Nick Freesia knows that Dale McCusick is a drug dealer, but he owes him, because he would not have had a career as an FBI agent. He would not have gotten to wear the $10,000 hand-cut, hand-tailored Italian suits and Rolex. He wouldn't be able to do any of that. He would have spent 2 years in the same Mexican prison, and he probably would have ended up being his partner as a drug dealer. So into that walks Michelle Pfeiffer's Joanne Volinari, who runs this very fancy and apparently high-class restaurant. But the FBI is interested in the fact that Dale McCusick seems to be frequenting this place more than usual, and they get the idea that maybe Mr. McCusick is back in action. And is Nick Freesia going to have to get involved in a Faustian bargain of trying to simultaneously keep his friend out of harm's way, but also maybe kind of set him up a little bit to see if he's going to move back into drug dealing, and then he's going to have to bust his friend. So there is a lot of moral dilemmas and quandaries. And filling out the cast in supporting roles are a couple of really wonderful actors who are no longer with us in the extraordinary J.T. Walsh, the human cheat code as a supporting actor. I mentioned Kurt Russell in Breakdown. J.T. Walsh, it's not really a spoiler, he plays the villain, the main villain in Breakdown. Well, in the world of this film, he's an FBI agent, but a guy from like Central Command, if you will, who joins Kurt Russell and their team when they start to kind of hyper-fixate on Dale McCusick and what is he doing. And then there is another FBI agent played by a phenomenal actor who has been gone more than 3 decades, Raul Julia. And I don't love Raul Julia's performance in this movie. He plays the role almost for comedy, and I feel like it's a little bit out of whack with the rest of the story, but it's still good to see him in this sort of a broad role, because Raul Julia normally was very tight and focused in movies such as Presumed Innocent, where he ends up playing Harrison Ford's lawyer when Harrison Ford, who is a lawyer in the world of that film, gets accused of murdering a woman he had an affair with, played by Greta Scacchi, who also was, for a time, it seemed like she was in every movie and was just all over the place. But what Tequila Sunrise does, other than the obvious, which is have 3 all-time movie stars, you know, kind of going to war in many different aspects, whether it's romance, whether it's I'm going to bust this guy. This is a film about 3 movie stars. This is a film showing off just how good looking these people, well, at the time are, and now we can almost marvel at the genetics on display on screen. Boy, Mel looks great. Kurt never looked better. And wow, Michelle Pfeiffer. Wow. And Michelle Pfeiffer, later in the same year, had Fabulous Baker Boys with the brothers Bridges, Jeff and Bo. And that movie, you had movie critics from Roger Ebert on down. They all but were spilling DNA writing their reviews of how ridiculously hot Michelle Pfeiffer was in that film. But this movie does something different. Not so much plot-wise, but character-wise. Michelle Pfeiffer, yes, she's the object of desire, but she's the object of desire more for Mel Gibson's Dale McCusick than Kurt Russell's Nick Freesia. And what this film does that is crazy, it sets Nick Freesia up as the sex object. Joanne Volinari wants him. He does not make a play for her. She's all over him. And he plays into it because he's pretty sure that Mel, as Dale McCusick, has goo-goo eyes for her. And maybe she knows something about what my best friend might be up to in the criminal arena. And that is not something that you ever expect to see, where, yes, there is still the male gaze. If we want to get psychoanalytic, I could give you the Freudian film theory shit here. I don't want to put you to sleep. There is still the male gaze and the gaze of the viewer looking at Michelle Pfeiffer. But Nick Freesia is presented as almost a male version of Joanne Volinari, that this is a really hot guy, and she wants him. And Michelle Pfeiffer is given, there's more to the role than there seems, and I've always felt that she was a bit under-repped as far as what a terrific actress she is, and I know she got an Oscar nomination. It felt like a courtesy nomination. It was a film that's not that good, called Love Field. She plays a woman who had an obsession, or has an obsession with Jacqueline Bouvier, aka Jackie O. Kennedy. I'm sorry, I forgot her name. And then after the Kennedy assassination, she decides to venture to Dallas. And it's just not good. Michelle's performance is good, and she was rewarded with a Best Actress nomination, but it reminded people at the time that 1992, the Motion Picture Academy made a big deal about 92 being the year of the woman, and there weren't that many great female roles for women that year. And then Billy Crystal famously at the Oscars made a joke. This is supposed to be the year of the woman. There weren't that many great women's parts. Most of the best women's parts belong to Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct. And that is as inappropriate as you can get. But somehow Billy Crystal pulled it off, and he had the entire gallery in stitches, including Sharon Stone, who I'm pretty sure was briefed and was okay with that joke. It was in such terrible taste, but it was still hilarious. Anyway, Michelle Pfeiffer in Tequila Sunrise. She believes that Nick Freesia is on the level, that he's falling for her. And this isn't to say that he doesn't think she's hot, but he doesn't see her as a romantic partner. He just sees her as a potential conduit for information. And it allows Michelle to have a great moment where she lays out how she sees these two guys who are circling her like hungry vultures. She says it appears that Mr. McCusick is engaging in business, coming into her restaurant, for purely romantic reasons. And it appears that Mr. Freesia has engaged in romance for purely business reasons. And it's just such a jarring moment, and it's such a twist on the usual idea of the woman being the object of desire, when in fact Joanne Volinari legitimately is falling in love with Nick Freesia. And, you know, it's kind of crazy to think of young Mel Gibson as the backup plan, but he's kind of the backup plan. And without going into spoilers, and before I forget, this film was a significant box office hit. It was budgeted somewhere, budget and marketing between 20 and 25 million, and it grossed over 100 at the box office. Despite the fact it didn't get great reviews, there were some critics that really liked it. They appreciated the amazing cinematography, and not so much the performances, but the movie stars. This film is all about the stars and the star power and the charisma of three people who, what great careers they all had. I mean, even something, a trifle like Ant-Man 3 Quantumania from a couple of years ago. Michelle Pfeiffer is just, she radiates movie star charisma even in a movie like that. She's fantastic, as is, if we're being honest, Michael Douglas. Oh, it was so good to see Michael Douglas. That's probably going to be the last film that Michael Douglas ever makes. But Michelle Pfeiffer in this movie kind of goes above and beyond. She goes above and beyond just looking great. And, you know, Mel, for somebody who, as we've seen, is a tremendous screen actor. You know, I don't like to get into the personal stuff, and you know, he's a very polarizing figure. I understand that. I'm not talking about the guy. I'm talking about, you know, the filmmaker and the actor. Mel does not do that much with his role. It seems like it should be a more interesting character than it actually is, a drug dealer who doesn't want to be a drug dealer anymore. But Mel is kind of trapped in a little bit of a box because the main character is Nick Freesia. And he does seem pretty fucking soulless for huge chunks of the film before finding a bit of humanity. Or maybe he had it in him all along, but he's presented as somebody who is, he's a bit craven, and he's not really a guy that we would necessarily want to meet in real life. But when we think of all of the kind of turns of plot and this kind of shit, there is another level of ridicularity, and I think that this was intentional, that Robert Towne was we were supposed to draw this conclusion. In a film with a restaurateur, numerous FBI agents, numerous people in law enforcement, people who don't have criminal records. The only person in the entire film with a criminal record is Dale McCusick. He is the only person in the movie that I would say is likable. And if that isn't effed up, that's not something that I ever imagined I would see a movie where this is probably the nicest guy in the film. And I'm reminded of another movie with big actors from almost a decade later, The Devil's Own, with Harrison Ford and Brad Pitt. It wasn't supposed to be Harrison Ford. That part that Harrison played was very much underwritten. But Brad Pitt in that movie plays an IRA operative. But because it's Brad Pitt of that era, as Roger Ebert, the late great film critic I always reference, Brad Pitt plays the cutest, cuddliest, most likable, warm-hearted, cold-blooded killer, probably in the history of movies. Well, Dale McCusick is the nicest, most likable, affable, friendly cocaine dealer in the history of cinema. Comes across like a real prince of a guy. And then, that it could fuck you up the more you start thinking about that. Am I supposed to root for the drug dealer? What? But yes, you are. It's okay to root for the drug dealer. In the manner of Clint Eastwood in High Plains Drifter playing an absolutely horrendous, horrible guy. But everyone else is even worse than him, so I guess we're going to root for him. And Mel Gibson himself in Payback, years after Tequila Sunrise, he plays an unrepentant, unregenerate sack of shit, but everyone else is worse than him. Hence why that movie was promoted as what? Get ready to root for the bad guy. Well, Tequila Sunrise, we don't get ready to root for the bad guy. We do root for the bad guy because he's the most relatable, most understandable, and most likable presence in this film. So I did a little bit of a quick, Google search. I don't think that Tequila Sunrise is available on any streaming services for free. I mean, you can find it and rent it on Apple and Prime Video for $3 or whatever it might be. But it's a film that should be on Paramount Plus because I'm pretty sure it was a Paramount production. But it's not free on any service. Maybe you could find it on DirecTV or cable, just happening to air at a certain time. But this is a film that I always recommend to people. And honestly, I don't know anybody who's seen it who doesn't like it. This is a film for audiences. It's only a critic's movie in the sense of the beautiful shot composition and the really, as I mentioned, fantastic cinematography. But yeah, if you examine the story too closely, the seams start to show through. The utter ridicularity of the Raul Julia character, the Arliss Howard. Well, the Arliss Howard character makes more sense. But the Raul Julia character, the more you think about it, the less sense his character makes. But this is an exercise in style. This is an exercise in old-fashioned movie stars in a more modern era, but just looking great and having some priceless interactions and, a time in Hollywood when there were, as Quentin Tarantino would say, when there were still movie stars of the old sort. Conventional movie stars where just their name and names, in this case above the titles, would get people into the seats. And this isn't really a spoiler, but Mel's character and Michelle's character, they don't get together the way that we think they will or when they will. And that particular angle is similar in a weird way to Bull Durham. Because the movie Bull Durham, which was earlier that same year, 1988, for what it's worth, was promoted as, it's a baseball film. And many people argue that it's the best baseball film. It's not. The Natural is still number one. I don't give a shit what anybody says. But Bull Durham was promoted as a romance. And in particular, a romance between Susan Sarandon's Annie Savoy and the main character, played by Kevin Costner, of Crash Davis. They don't get together until the movie is almost over. In Tequila Sunrise, the marketing materials, the promotion of the film suggests a romance between Mel and Michelle. It doesn't say anything or show anything really about, at least the ads, you can go on YouTube and check out the trailers. I didn't see anything about Kurt Russell. Because if you drop into this movie at the 30-minute mark, you would think this is a romance. This is about Kurt and Michelle. And it's not. This is not a movie about a drug dealer either. It's not a movie about FBI agents turning and trying to, some people are on the level, some people aren't. Some people are just fucking stupid and make a series of very easily avoidable mistakes. You can go nuts breaking down the Ann Magnuson character. What's her process here? It's a film about 3 movie stars. That's all you need to know going in. just sit back, grab your popcorn and your soda or whatever it is, your nonpareils, and just enjoy the star power on parade of three of the legitimate all-time greats in Michelle and Mel and Kurt. Tequila Sunrise, written and directed by the late, great Robert Towne, the newest entry in our continuing series of guilty pleasure movies, starring Michelle Pfeiffer, Mel Gibson, Kurt Russell, J.T. Walsh, Raul Julia, Arliss Howard, and... man, I hate when I blank out on all of this shit, so I'll just close it because I can't remember the last person that I was trying to think of. This has been episode 580 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Saturday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace. It was Ann Magnuson. That was the last actor who I was trying to remember. Take care.